What if the reason you feel stuck isn't because you're not trying hard enough, but because you're trying too hard? We live in a world that glorifies control, controlling our emotions, our future, our relationships. But what if real freedom comes not from holding on, but from letting go? In today's episode, we're exploring the power of surrender, why releasing control can actually bring you more peace, clarity, and even success. If you've been feeling exhausted from this struggle, this one's for you. My name's Michael Perry, and I'm joined today by my teacher and mentor, Justin. And this is the new Ashla Podcast. So, Justin, what would you say is surrender? What is the difference between surrender and giving up? Because I think that's the biggest misconception out there.
Surrender. Surrender's hard. Surrender's hard for people. The art of surrendering, right? But what's important is what surrender is not. It's not weakness.
Yes.
Many would allude to, right? In truth, it's one of the most powerful things we can do. It almost comes from our soul, in a way. It almost feels that way.
Well, I feel like it has to in so many occasions and in situations where surrender is something that is so important to us, not important to do, but something that's so difficult for us. It is a matter of the soul because it's going against everything we were fighting for.
Everything. Everything we were taught, everything we experienced up to the moment we learn about surrender. And that surrender, when that moment comes, that's when we release the illusion of control. And we open ourselves up. We open up our minds. We open up our hearts to full alignment with whatever the divine is for you.
Yeah. Well, and it's like surrender it's such a key part of this process. More and more, the shadow work, developing healthy relationships and removing unhealthy attachments, jobs that we are fighting to do every day that drain us. It is this struggle we have where we have to release these things in order to live the lives we want to live, to live in alignment with our authenticity. Because often the things that we need to surrender are things that are directly tied to these societal masks we wear, these belief systems that we have. I mean, how many men do you think struggle with getting off their high horse? And I mean that in all respect, because men are conditioned to be strong, to be stoic. And that right there is a misconception. Stoic is not devoid of emotion. But it's so hard for people to acknowledge their own pain and admit to it, surrender to it.
That's a really good point, because to surrender is not so much to quote unquote let go, at least not letting go of responsibility.
Yeah, no.
Right? But letting go of resistance. For us, in our teaching,
denial.
Exactly. And in our teachings, it's more of a return to the rhythm of the force.
Yes.
Or the divine, whichever divine you are connected to. That's what it is. It's trusting that the light within you is greater than the chaos around you at any given time. It's to weather the storm, not escape it. It's to
acknowledge the storm.
Acknowledge it, and to let things be as they're going to be if you don't have control of them anyway. It's about letting go of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things in life we try to control. But if you really were to sit down and be honest with yourself of the things in your life you truly can control, that is a small list. It's a very important list.
Yeah, and it requires your mindful attention and your awareness. You know, something that I taught you early on when we talked about surrendering, we talked about attachment, was that, you know, as I told you, it wasn't the absence of effort, but it was offering yourself to a higher purpose, to your authentic purpose.
Yeah. Well, I think another key part of what you're saying there is also the detachment from outcome. Mm-hmm. Unconditional love means I will love you, or I'll love this situation. I will give this my all. And as much as I will want the best outcome, I am detached from it going exactly how I need it to go for me to be happy.
Yes. And here we practice the art of surrender every time we breathe mindfully, every time we forgive freely, every time we
Yes.
release a burden that we can't carry alone.
Yeah.
It's like that pause before reacting. That's a surrender. The silence that we exhibit before judgment. That's a surrender. The stillness where our wisdom actually grows.
Yeah. When you brought up another important topic just a few moments ago, and that's trust. I mean, one of the reasons we so rigidly hold on to these things we wish to control, we wish to devote ourselves to for the best outcome that we see, is it's a lack of trust in either A, the situation, or within ourselves, or in
Yeah.
the outcome. When we can release and trust that things will unfold the way they need to, the more we can give it to God, give it to the universe, the more we can trust that everything will happen as it need to and you gave it your best, the
Right.
more things will unfold before you. The more you are in surrender and you are in acceptance. And through acceptance, you have so much more energy available to you because you're not pouring it into trying to micromanage and control this person, situation, outcome, whatever it is. I love how you were talking about forgiveness and how that's an act of surrender. I mean, life sucks. And I don't mean that in a pessimistic, negative kind of way, but life happens to all of us. And the more we can go with the ebb and flow of these harsh moments in our lives, acknowledge our parts in it and what we can do about it, what we do have control over, that small list, the more we can pour energy into what matters and not in what is outside of our control or what is not going to end up benefiting us in the long run.
Yeah, two things. And you said it perfectly. Two things I want to point out. Something fundamentally awesome happens when you submit to a higher idea. When you submit to a higher purpose, that could be God, that could be the universe, that could be the force, that could be Buddha, Jesus, whatever. I am happy for you, whichever it
Yeah.
is you decide to divert your eyes to, because that starts to open us up to purpose, to living for something greater than what's going on around us. That's how my Luminari draws strength, by not forcing
Yeah.
outcomes, but by harmonizing with the deeper truths that are flowing through all things, all the time, everywhere around them.
Yeah. I mean, it brings me to that quote, right? It's like just because you lost the battle does not mean you lost the war.
No.
And as much as that's a rough analogy for it, it's the truth. So often we get so caught up in these battles and we fight with all our might, tooth and nail. And
Hmm.
the minute we surrender, we give up on that battle, we realize that was just one part of our life. 20 years from now, it is going to be inconsequential to our journey, other than the lessons we had to learn from it, because often those are the battles we learn the most.
When people ask me about surrender, I then ask them a few questions normally. Things like, what can you release today? What's one thing that you can kind of let go of? It could be the smallest thing. That's a step. Another thing I would ask them, and I think I've asked you this too, what weight are you carrying around that's not yours to carry? It's not your
Yeah.
responsibility or even your burden to bear.
Yes. And you have asked me that many a time, because that has always been a struggle I have faced. When you love deeply, you want to carry the weight of others, and it's okay to carry people's weight if they're carrying it too.
Yes,
But that's part of the surrender, right? You
right.
got to acknowledge where they're at.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about this before on other shows where in a relationship, it's not about 50-50. It's about who can help the group or the pair reach 100%. And sometimes, listen, even on these podcasts, sometimes I'm pulling 65% and you're pulling 35, but in other times I'm pulling 25 and you're running the show. That's just how it goes. But at the end of the day, we have 100% effort.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a great topic to bring up in this, because this is also in surrender. There's no tally marks here. I mean, there's accountability, but there's no tally marks. There's nothing that we're going with the flow of where we're at and we're contributing where we can. And this is so important in relationships, in the workplace, It's like you see so much of this in corporate where people are unhappy because corporate's demanding 100% from everybody every day. And like
Hmm.
I work for a small company now, and it's a great company to work for because there is that flow. When people are having off days, we're not going to demand 100% from them.
Yeah.
We balance each other out because we all know to pick up the slack when we need to. But we also know if we're having a bad day, that's okay too.
Right.
And I mean, another important part with that is the team you have, because there are those people that'll siphon the life force out of the team.
Just suck it right out of your bone marrow. Just right out of the bones. It just takes it from you. Yeah.
You know?
But I will just say again, especially when we're looking at surrendering to a partner or a team within these relationships, big and small, is that again, this art of surrender happens every time we breathe mindfully, every time we forgive freely, every time we release a burden that we cannot carry alone. It's the pause before reacting, the silence before judgment. So all of these things center around the act of surrender. And again, it doesn't mean giving up or letting go of responsibility, but it's letting go of that resistance that's just causing us problems.
Yeah. Well, I think another important thing to touch on when we go into talking about what is surrender, one of the most important parts of our teachings is vulnerability. Through vulnerability, we can acknowledge when we need to surrender more or not, or if
Yeah.
there's a topic we need to give up. The more we can be transparent with those we trust and love, the more we can have that mirrored back, and we can create symbiotic relationships where people can be like, give us reference, they can give us perspective. And it doesn't mean we have to take their perspective every time. But when you cultivate intimate relationships on vulnerability and love, and you allow yourself to show yourself your struggles, where you're at in life, you will get the support you need because they will see you for fully who you are. Again, we talk often about societal masks. This is the conditioning that we are working to unravel to get to our authenticity. And when
Yeah.
we're wearing these masks, we're trying to show people a version of ourselves because we don't feel like we're enough or that we're too much. And so we tried to hide that. But the more you peel these away, the more you surrender to who you truly are, shortcomings and all, the more people will welcome you into their lives, because when you try to be a perfect person, you're not going to have those deep relationships because they're not going to understand you at the level you need understood.
Or, yes, or you'll run yourself ragged trying to appease everyone.
Yeah, true that.
Another thing I would ask everyone struggles with surrender. Where in your life can you trust your higher divine connection or self to guide you, especially in those moments when you can't see the path clearly? And if it's every one of us has, even me, even you, Michael, from time to time has these moments where I can't see the path clearly. I must now divert my eyes to a higher idea.
And one thing to say with that, because you're absolutely right, you can spend your life following this journey. You hear people talk about awakening. You never fully awaken. It is constant growth and evolution. But you will always resort to your nervous system, your psychology. You will never be perfect. And so when you can understand that you hit these moments that you're not very clear on what's going on, where emotion is what's driving your thought process, and you seek that higher self. I mean, it's not what Justin's referring to, isn't the flip of a switch. Oh, I need to consult my higher power. Hold on, let me tune out real quick and talk to you.
Right.
It's grounding yourself, it's bringing yourself to a stable place. We talk about nervous system regulation. That's something I can't preach enough to anyone on this journey to learn. Because through nervous system regulation, you can calm your emotions. You can surrender to your emotions and allow them to exist without judgment, have them running you. And getting to the. Well, what tips do you have? Because you're even better at this than me. What can people do to start cultivating that relationship and learning to communicate with their higher self? What does that look like?
Well, number one is to understand that you are always connected. You're always connected. We are interconnected with literally everything in the universe, including our higher selves, our higher ideals, our higher emotions, everything. And is to not allow yourself to fall into this trap where I have lost connection. I am overwhelmed. I can't find a way out of this. And oftentimes we tend to dig holes when we get in trouble. And we keep digging and digging and digging, somehow thinking that we're going to magically take the dirt and get ourselves out of there. But it is just remembering that you're the one digging the hole. You're the one that built the prison. You are the warden of your own prison. You are the judge of your own court. And you can just simply remember to say, no, I'm done.
Well, I think so many people do get so trapped in a situation where they don't realize they have the ability to walk away. That
Yeah.
7-year relationship I was in, I always felt like I could not walk away from that. And that was my own internal dialogue, the own prison I created for myself. We must always acknowledge that there's always another way,
There's
especially when
always
we
a
feel
solution
trapped.
to every problem. There is a solution to every problem. And in fact, there are infinite number of solutions to every problem. We teach this, we know this, we practice this.
So let's talk about more in detail about some of these things we need to surrender. I think one of the most important ones that keeps people stuck is emotions.
Yeah.
Now, I keep talking about learning how to sit with emotions, allowing them to be, and how that's how you move through them.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
would you elaborate on this? What are your
Well,
thoughts on this?
it's not about letting them rule you. It's about
Yes.
allowing them to speak to you. I
Ooh,
want to use
yeah.
it. I'm going to use a couple analogies here. Think of a modern car with its thousands of sensors constantly monitoring every little detail of what a car does as it rolls down the road. You can think of emotions in that way. They speak to us to tell us something. And we're not here to suppress our emotions, but we're also not here to be enslaved by them. We've talked about that
Yeah.
harmony between ego and soul, right? We must harmonize with our emotions. None of our emotions are bad if they are allowed to speak. We acknowledge them, but then we bring ourselves back to harmony. Sometimes anger is a very valid response to something. People
Yeah.
will say, people will say, well, anger's bad. No, anger's bad when you're busting out 15 windows out of a store because they refuse to take your refund. That's bad. But it's okay
Yeah.
to stand up for yourself and be angry as long as you're not now being controlled by them. Another
Yeah.
analogy, and I know you love analogies, so here's another
Oh, I
analogy
do.
for
I'm
you.
eating this
I
up.
know. Before I get to that, though, I just want to reiterate emotions are messengers to us in a lot of ways because many of our triggers are subconscious. And it's not like we actively walk around going, I want to be triggered. I want to be triggered. I don't want to be triggered because when I do, it's usually when I lose my stuff, right?
Yep.
So, but think of emotions kind of like waves in the ocean, right? They rise and they fall, but they never define the depth of the ocean.
Yeah. That's good. That's real good. The one thing I got to throw in here, and it's something that I learned recently. It's not something I learned, but it was a great way to phrase it. It's okay to feel angry. It's
Yeah,
important to feel angry, but it's
yeah,
your responsibility what you do with that anger. It's
yes,
okay to feel sadness, but what you do with that sadness is your responsibility.
yes,
And all emotions, like you're saying, how they are messengers. The whole point of shadow work is to get your emotional compass calibrated, to get
yes,
yourself where you can follow your intuition and your instincts to tell you which way to go. And some of that also includes not following where it tells you to go. But emotions are so important because they help us show up in life in a way that is authentic. I mean, again, one of my biggest issues was anger. I struggled so much with anger because I was taught at a young age it was bad. And
yeah,
I'm learning that it's like through repressing anger, I've let people walk on me my whole life. But now that I'm cultivating anger, when someone crosses a boundary, again, it's my responsibility what I do with my anger. But I can say, hey, I didn't appreciate that, and I can create the dialogue to either have a change in the behavior or to do something about it. I mean, the point of boundaries aren't for other people.
yes.
Boundaries are for us.
They're for us.
It's
They
if
are.
you keep doing this, there will be consequences. And usually those consequences don't involve retaliation, but involves you're showing me your place in my life.
We
So I
teach
had to throw that
alchemy.
in there.
No, it's true. It's very true. We teach alchemy here. And
Yeah.
some of that alchemy that I teach, that surrendering to emotion, begins with acceptance, not agreement, not indulgence, but acknowledgement. Because we have to recognize what we feel before we can alchemize it into something useful, something perhaps higher, if that's a word you want to use. The universe, the force, our connection to God, it only flows freely when we don't resist it. We are the resistance to our connection to the divine. No one else can do that. We do that to ourselves. So
Yeah.
we have to remember that there are points of surrender that we must embrace because higher things are trying to move through us and work through us. Healing only begins when we stop resisting how we feel, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's one of the major sources of suffering in the world today. So many people resist what they're feeling, shove it down, don't act on what those emotions are telling them, and they end up going down a dark path. And another important thing to look at here is as we're talking about acknowledging your emotions, listening to your emotions, this does not mean identifying with, because when you start to identify with your emotions, that's when they start taking hold and telling you what to do. And you don't want to let your emotions tell you what to do. That,
Yeah.
which again is, there's a fine line between listening. What is the message they are telling me? What am I not seeing here, perceiving, or what is it trying to inform me of? And not letting it be where someone cuts you off in traffic and your anger kicks up and it's like, hey, you need to cut that guy off now. You need to throw something at his windshield. It's like,
Right.
no, no, it's like, no, I'm frustrated because this guy's an erratic driver and I'm trying to mind my own business here. Like, all right, it's okay to feel anger. What I do with it's important though.
Right. Let's talk about grief for a second because grief is something we all can kind of get around the campfire for, right? We all have grief.
Yeah.
And so grief is something that we have experienced here in my home this last week. Our cat, Salem, who was 16 years old, this tiny little black cat, she was one of the original OG pets. She outlasted them all. I'm pretty sure she had 18 lives because she had seen some stuff. But, grief is something we can universally all kind of understand together. And, with grief, it's about allowing the sorrow, the pain, or the joy, or the anger, or the frustration, all of the emotions. It's
Because all
about
those come with
allowing
grief.
those.
My God.
What's that?
All those come with grief. My
They
God.
do, they do, and there are some good models out there that say you kind of go through the 7 stages of grief and all this. Uh, you know what? I will never tell any of you how to grieve, and I will never accept you telling other people how to grieve. As long as they're not hurting themselves, as long as they're not hurting others, let them grieve in the way that they're going to, for the most part, right?
You know,
But grief is one of those emotional overloads that we get, and we can't. Everyone has to deal with it one way or the other. But again, it's about allowing these things to flow through us because they're telling us something, and we must listen. But again, we don't have to agree, we don't have to indulge, but we must acknowledge.
well, I think there's a level of importance to feeling. I mean, feeling your emotions. I talk often about how emotions, when not felt, when we repress them, it's like stored energy in a battery, and things that relate to that stored emotional, that event that hit it, put that battery on high alert and can cause explosions. Grief, like you said, is such an overwhelming emotion because what was the word used? Wasn't overwhelming, but it is such an abundant emotion. There's so much that goes into grief. Grief is one of the things that does destroy a lot of people's lives because they don't allow themselves to process it. The girl I was with for 7 years who suffered from addiction, her whole thing was her mother died and she was there for it. And she kept shoving that down. That's what led to her addiction. That's what led to her self destruction and the cycle she got into. And I've seen that with so many people. Even I went kind of hard into alcohol after I lost her and she passed away. And luckily, I had watched what happened to her, so I made sure I cried. I let myself go to grief groups. I talked about my experiences, good and bad. Again, those all the emotions that go with grief: joy, sadness, regret. And it's emotions when we have them, especially this charged energy, which when you go through grief, it will fill that battery up. When we process these emotions, it's like a balloon losing air. And you gotta slowly deflate it. It can't all go at once. You can't just have one really good 10-hour cry and you're over it. That's not how grief works. I remember talking to my girl about this, and it was a great conversation because she had the perfect analogy. It's like we have a spigot on a water main, and we open that up and let the water leave out that water main. Because if we were to try to process it all at once, it would be destruction.
It would. Comfort and healing comes when we stop fighting ourselves and hold us, and we have to start holding a space for what is real within us. These things are real,
Yeah.
and we must start to give them space. Maybe not all at once, but again, I'm not going to tell you how to grieve. But generally speaking, we must come to a place where we surrender and let them have a space long enough to work through us, because every time you deny what's authentic in you, you invite disharmony.
Yes. That's beautiful.
Surrendering to emotions is also, in a way, how we listen to our soul. It's how we release this pressure of trying to, as you said earlier, put these different masks on. It releases that pressure and helps us step into authenticity. It is not a weakness. I can't say that enough. Surrender is not a weakness. It is literally the path to mastery.
Yes. Yes. Well, it's like we talk about shadow work and starting the journey. And you hear everywhere, it's like it gets worse before it gets better. And it's because these things start coming to the surface. As you start making space for them, they start finding room within you so that they can start releasing, so they can start learning how to communicate with you. And that's a process. You don't just go to a foreign country and know the language, and
Right.
learning the dialogue of these emotions, giving them the space they need, learning to hear what these emotions needs are. And this is an important thing about understanding emotions. For anyone who's new to this, working on this, who really has struggled with this, you need to look up the emotions wheel. And it's a giant wheel with all the different emotions on it. And it's so important because often when we don't have that emotional intelligence, we don't know how to handle these emotions properly. So when we look at emotions and how easy it is to confuse them, a great example of this is you could be feeling you could be feeling in your body embarrassed because you messed up or slipped in front of a girl on a first date, and you can confuse that emotion with something like rejection. You're going to think parts of you that you've repressed. It's learning to shed light on them, understand why they've been hiding in the dark, and learning how to embrace them and let them become a part of you. So what are your thoughts around surrendering to things like struggles and uncertainty? I mean, we've touched a little bit on it, but let's dive into it.
Well, as we struggles and uncertainty, they're not detours, they're part of this path. They are part of it, unfortunately. Like shadow work, it's not really optional, right? It's just going to happen.
Won't even elaborate more. I'd say they're a part of life. I mean,
Of
whether
course.
you choose this path or not, you're going to deal with struggles and uncertainty. But this
Yeah.
path is what allows you to navigate that.
But to surrender to the struggle is one of the most sacred acts that those of us who kind of walk this path of the spiritual warrior undertakes. It's
Yeah.
where we kind of stop asking, why is this happening to me? Or, you know, and we start to ask, what is this trying to awaken within me? We teach that every trial, whether it's an internal trial, an external struggle, it's like a refining fire, like you're in the forge, right? It shapes us, it tempers us, and ultimately it reveals our authentic self. And I'll
Yeah.
say this as it links back to kind of what we were talking about just a second ago about shadow work. It's in these moments of our deepest darkness that these acts of surrender become kind of that bridge to peace within.
Yeah. Well, it's like the moments a lot of us will say, no, I'm not someone who tries to control things. I don't try to control life or other people. I accept life. I go with the flow. Well, when you are in the struggle and you know exactly, you think back to a time where you really struggled in life, where you were up against a wall. There was
Yeah.
a level of you that was trying to control the outcome or situation. And through surrender, through surrendering to what is happening, to understand that you don't have control over this situation, but of yourself. And this ties into radical responsibility, right? It's
Yes.
being responsible for where you're at and the situation. It doesn't mean necessarily taking full responsibility for the negative thing that's happening in your life, but it's being able to look at it and understand the part you play in your own suffering. It is to take the lesson and surrender to this horrible outcome you are facing so that you can move through it and come out the other side better.
Yeah, and let's change some language for folks out there. When we think of surrender, we got to stop saying to ourselves or out loud or to each other that surrender is not to give up. Replace that with surrendering is to give over to something greater, something wiser, timeless, whatever.
Yeah.
Not giving up, but giving over.
Yeah. And often that thing you are struggling against, that horrible outcome you are so horrified is happening, on the other side of that is something 10 times better.
It's important to remember, and this is something that I teach you. Struggles are teachers. They teach us things. If we are receptive and we are open-minded, open-hearted.
I actually so I worked with the Tony Robbins team to do a little bit of coaching. A little too expensive for my budget, but I did a little bit. And I
Yeah.
love this. So they talk about, when you talk about trauma and these struggles that we
Mm-hmm.
go through in life, they say we don't call it trauma. We don't call it struggles. They were worthy opponents.
Yeah. That ties right into the idea of the warrior, right?
Yep.
That's good. I like that.
I thought you would. I've been waiting to spring that on you.
But something to consider. I said struggles are teachers. Uncertainty is space, and what is in that space? Potential.
Infinite.
Potential, right? You and I talk a lot about the void offline. We discuss the void and we do this, and I don't believe the void is this thing where, because the void sounds scary, sounds like a black hole that just sucks everything into all the light into it and all this stuff. The void is not the void. For us, the void is a space of potential. That's all it is.
Yeah,
So
well, I mean, it's like if you look at it psychologically, it's survival instincts. As we've evolved as people, it is our need to grow and expand. It is an internal drive that we all have. And it might be dormant for some who are kind of wanderingly aimlessly right now. But the void is that drive for more, for abundance, for that's why so many people, when they get to where they want to be, they enter depression. Is because they realize they're not at that level of fulfillment. They want to grow more. That's why so many millionaires struggle with depression. It's that unconscious need to expand beyond where we're at, because that us as spiritual beings crave growth.
but our higher selves understand this one thing is that the universe, when you think of the void, it has this connotation that there is no choice. But if we instead see that open space, not empty space, because a void would be empty space, we want to change our perspective to say it's an open space of potential, because within that open space is where we make our choices and where we decide what paths we're going to take. With the void, there's really no choice because it's just empty and you can just imagine yourself falling forever. And this is why some types of meditations that are, quote unquote, void type meditations, where you just sit for long periods of time and into this vast nothingness, why people with certain traumas really have a hard time with those. So instead, we say it is an open space for unlimited possibilities, because
Yeah.
then that kind of opens us up to say, can get out of this no matter what it is. I can get out of it. For every problem, there is a solution. If I have the mindset that there is an open space in front of me full of infinite potential. So, struggle teaches us things. When we're uncertain, we must look out into the field, open field of potential. And where surrender fits in that, you're really kind of sitting at the feet of both. And you're learning and you're growing and you are choosing your adventures at that point.
Yeah. I mean, you look at this and it all ties in. Another way that control and going through these moments of suffering is in fact us clinging to certainty. When we have an unknown thing happen, when we don't know what's going to happen or what's on the other side of something, it is us clinging to certainty because we crave knowing what's going to happen. We crave consistency. And there
Yes.
is nothing scarier to our nervous systems, to our minds, than going into something that is new. I mean, that's why so many people don't leave their dead end jobs, is because they're too afraid to take that leap into something that they would have to start over, that there isn't that certainty that they would be good at that job or it is a good job. I know that's why I was at Johnson and Johnson for 7 years, and that job was horrible. I worked 60-hour weeks for 5 years of the 7 I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was because I felt too comfortable. I was making enough money. There wasn't enough drama going on in the workplace, even though now in hindsight, having a nice job, I look back and it's like there was tons of drama because we acclimate to our situations. We will cling to certainty over surrendering to the unknown.
Yeah. Well, that goes back to our survival mechanisms from 200,000 years ago. We really like it when food is constantly coming to us. We like it when safety and security is constantly coming to us.
Yeah. And surrender doesn't mean inaction, it means working with life rather than against it. It means being able to not only go with the ebb and flow and ride the waves as they come, but it means taking that wave and seeing where it can take you, putting your effort into going forward. Because one of the most important parts of us living a life of fulfillment and authenticity isn't just becoming whole within ourselves, but it's taking action to follow, as Justin has said multiple times in this episode, working towards something greater than ourselves. That's what our purpose is working to build something greater than ourselves that calls to our souls.
Yes.
And that requires taking action, but it also requires surrender to where that path takes you.
And simply because we are all greater than we can imagine.
Yeah.
We are. Don't let, and I know many of us do this. I think maybe all of us from time to time do this. We forget that we are great. We're made up of stardust, literally the stuff that comprises the whole entire universe. We are made of that stuff too. And if the universe is great, then we must be great. We just forget. We just get kind of weighed down. We let people
Yeah.
beat us down and hold us down. Don't have to be that way.
Practice, practice, practice.
Right. And going back to the kind of need to control, which is really what this centers around, all of these that we're talking about. When life becomes unclear and we struggle, surrender the need to control and replace it with something. You can't just remove stuff and then everything's fine. If you remove something, you got to replace it with something. So replace the need to control with commitment to respond with presence and mindfulness. Surrender the outcomes, because then you can lean into the opportunity that this, again, field of possibilities allows us.
Yeah. When it's like once you get to a place of surrender, I mean, that's where inspired action comes from. You ever do something on a whim, you just get this idea, this burst of energy of like, I want to do this. And you do it, and it was one of the greatest things you've ever done in your life. I mean,
Yeah.
inspired action, the more you get in tune, the more you can surrender to life and the currents of life, the more you will have moments of clarity and just energy. I mean, we hear about flow state. For anyone who doesn't know what flow state is, it's where you're doing work that is effortless to you. Justin and I recording this podcast, it is it is us in flow because we don't feel drained doing it. We could have a rough day at work. We've talked about this before. We had a rough day at work. We come onto this podcast, and as we do it, there's this level of fulfillment and energizing that comes from it. And when we leave it, we feel better than when we started. And yeah, we've talked about how some days we don't have 100% to give, but that does not mean that we weren't 100% present and engaged and finding fulfillment from the work we were doing. And that's a big part of inspired action, is being able to act on those intuitive moments of, I need to pursue this. I need to go out and do this. I know I've had moments where it's like, I feel like driving to this random spot, and I do it. And I see the most beautiful sunset. I meet the coolest people. And as much as it could have just been happenstance, I believe there's a level of the universe meeting me halfway.
In our teachings, we do not believe in coincidence.
Nope.
Period. Period. Synchronicities. But
Yeah.
synchronicities, you can miss those. And it's only when you stop resisting what is, when you start to surrender to the flow, you start aligning with what can be, the stuff starts falling into place. And again, like many things on this path and paths like it, it's not easy. Concerning struggles and uncertainty, this can be one of the hardest thing a heart can do. But again, it's one of the most transformative things that you will, as you just alluded to, it will transform you when you surrender.
Yeah. So one thing we haven't touched on that I want to take a minute to talk about is surrender in relationships. And this doesn't mean giving up on people, giving up on allowing people to act belligerent towards you, but to allow people to be themselves. You know, often when people are going through their own darkness, their own struggles, and we see them sort of flopping around trying to find direction, we want to lead them along like shepherds and tell them what they need to do to get their lives together. And we have to accept that they are on their own journey. They are learning their lessons as they can. We talk about on here about confusion. What is the word I'm looking for here? The law of confusion, and how people can only learn the lessons in their own time, through their own experiences. We can give wisdom, but some wisdom will not be obtained until someone is able to experience and embody that wisdom for themselves. You know, it's loving our spouse as they are, flaws and all.
Yes.
Seeing the perfection in their imperfections.
Right?
And so I think that's a really important thing to touch on, is we are all flawed human beings, and we are all in different phases in our lives. And don't be too high on your horse, because one day you may drop down to a lower place while that person excels. It's accepting everyone where they're at and loving them anyway. And that doesn't mean necessarily tolerating everything, or knowing when you need to make space with somebody if they're on a destructive path, but it's loving them regardless, holding that space and keeping that door open for when they do get better. Because the more we try to control people, the more we destroy those relationships and create unspoken expectations. You know, when we have a relationship with anyone, we have a relationship with two people, who they are and who they are in our minds. And the most important thing we can do is have congruence there, to have that picture in our heads as close to who they actually are as possible.
You said it perfectly. And I'll just back you up here that surrender in relationships isn't about giving up your voice or your boundaries or your truth. It's about letting go of that illusion that you somehow think that you can control another person's journey, or that your love should come with conditions.
Yeah.
We teach, in our teachings, we speak of this kind of surrender as more of a spiritual openness. We show up with presence, with integrity, with compassion, and we don't cling to how someone else should act or think or feel.
Yeah.
You know, Jesus modeled this perfectly. Think about the followers that he gathered before that kind of D-Day for him, right? He loved the people that he gathered exactly where they were. He loved a tax collector, a fisherman, a doubter, even some dude that he knew was going to literally betray him and offer him up as a sacrifice. And he never forced their transformation. He simply invited it. He planted those seeds, and he let it unfold as it was going to unfold without controlling it.
Yeah. No, that's such a perfect representation. I mean, we talk about Jesus a lot on this podcast, and as much as we're a spiritual podcast, man, Jesus, he is a perfect representation of what we strive to become. And that doesn't mean the Son of God and I'm going to create miracles everywhere.
But no, the spiritual alchemy that he so effortlessly awakened in people.
Yeah.
I've always loved Jesus, not in a religious way, but in a spiritual way.
When it's
And
like those bracelets, right? What would Jesus do?
right, right. And this isn't a religious podcast because we don't teach others dogmas. We encourage you to create your own dogma.
Yeah.
But
We
this kind of love, and we're talking about relationships for a moment. I know this love, this real love, this divine love, it allows freedom. That's what surrender looks like in a relationship. It's like saying, I release the need to fix you. I'm not here to fix you. I am not here to be responsible for your healing because I honor your path, even if it's not exactly aligned with mine. Now, this doesn't mean, as you said, this doesn't mean we tolerate harm or that we lose our authenticity in the process. Surrender and boundaries are kind of like brother and sister in this idea. They're not opposites.
Yeah.
Because surrender is what allows you to set boundaries from a position of love, not
Yes.
fear, from a position of clarity, not control.
Oh, that's so well said. Because we can love unconditionally while also not tolerating some people's behavior. And that's a difficult thing to do. It's a gut wrenching thing to do sometimes.
Yes.
But when you discover your authenticity, when you start caring for yourself in this way, you realize how important your needs are. You realize how important your well being is. And again, this isn't, I'm done with you, get out of my life. It's, I see where you're at. I love you.
Yes. And if
Yeah.
and if you look, if this is the first time you've ever heard somebody telling you that you need to surrender in this in a relationship, it's really surrendering and letting go of the attachment to being right all the time, or surrendering and letting go of the attachment to being kind of chosen by this person. Because then once you start trying to figure that out, why was I chosen? Well, all this, and I have all these flaws, and let go of that. It's also letting go of the attachment to who we thought someone should be. Because when we surrender these things,
Yes.
again, we create this space of potential for real connection, for mutual healing, and above all, for truth. So, I'll kind of throw this in here. If you're struggling right now with this type of thing, ask yourself, am I clinging or am I connecting? Am I trying to control or am I willing to just witness? Because to surrender in love is to offer presence without possession. Right?
Yeah. And it can
And
be
that's
hard
what
to
I
sit
love.
down and ask yourself that question and be honest with yourself. But
Be
man,
honest. Because look, everybody says this kind of love that we're talking about is rare, but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. Or this kind of surrender is, oh man, it's very sacred in these it doesn't have to be. At the end of the day, the kind of relationships that we should be building with ourselves, right? And with
no.
others, even as it shifts and it moves and it flows up and down, the goal should be always to foster this real connection, an authentic connection, letting the other person grow into their authenticity. And when they do, you will be overcome with joy and your heart will swell because it's beyond words when that happens.
Yeah. When again, the more you surrender, the more energy you have for other things. And when you're not trying to control in relationships, because there are so many people, I've been guilty of this myself, where 80% of my available energy is going towards relationships, there's a disconnect there. Healthy, abundant relationships, and it doesn't mean always good, but healthy, transparent, authentic relationships are effortless for the most part.
They get that way. They
Yeah.
do. And valuing truth and authenticity over all things, that's where this kind of love starts to become easy.
Yeah. And that's what unconditional love is, right?
Absolutely.
So, what are some practical ways people can start to cultivate serenity?
I'm probably going to steal this one from you because you like to go to the breath. I'm going to steal this one from you because you called on me first. So now, look, this may sound like I said just a minute ago. This may sound like some lofty, fluffy cloud spiritual idea, but in truth, it's a practice, a daily invitation. And like all things that we practice, it will deepen over time through intention and through practicing small, meaningful actions. So,
Yeah.
breath. We believe the breath is the bridge that kind of connects us holistically in many ways. The breath here could be a bridge between, let's say, resistance and release. So when you start to feel overwhelmed, anxious, or you fall back to trying to control everything, pause. Pause is the most awesome technique for everything that we do. It's okay to pause. Hit that pause button. You guys can't see what I'm doing, but I'm like doing the Tony Stark thing. I'm hitting the big pause button in this infinite screen in front of me. Pause. Breathe slowly, deliberately, intentionally, and just tell yourself, I release. I release the need to control. It sounds simple and maybe a little silly, but it retrains your nervous system to move from forcing everything into flowing with everything.
It's a fight or flight, right? When our nervous
Uh-huh.
system gets triggered, it puts on all those programs for survival instincts, and
Right.
it's like breathing is what helps bring everything back to baseline. In fact, I know he said how important it is, but let me tell you how important breathing is to Justin's teachings. When I first started training under him, he gave me a breathing exercise. He gave me a couple, but I had to practice them every day, and we would spend a month to 2 weeks, depending on the intensity of it, on each breathwork exercise, and I'd have to report on how it was working for me. But it was something he made me practice daily, and we went through 4 different exercises over the course of a couple months. It is one of the most important parts in
It
starting
does.
this.
It does because really you have to be holistic in your approach to authenticity. You cannot just go after the ego or the soul or the mind. You have and breath is our physical way. Is a physical way to starting to align us with our whole being.
Yes. Well, and I think one thing we don't really touch on much on is when we talk about all this work, when we talk about learning how to act differently, how to do shadow work and stuff like that. At the root of all of this work is the fact that our body controls us. When we have a sensation in our body, our mind touches our body and then follows whatever the body's telling it. That's how these systems work. That's why this is so important, is because the body is the greatest thing that'll tell you what to do when you're on autopilot. So when
Yeah.
you can learn to pause, which is the difference between reacting and acting, when you can
Yes.
learn to pause and bring your nervous system to a baseline, you get out of these systems that are activating, and you can act in a different manner because you're no longer acting from this activated place. Because all this work has to do with the body. The body is that which pushes us in any given direction to act, respond, and to behave. Addiction. When does addiction happen? When do we have a craving for something? It's when the body starts kicking on and it's like, I need to shut this down. I need a cigarette real quick. I need a shot. I need a hit of whatever it is.
Yeah.
Emotions. Emotions aren't just necessarily little voices. Hi, I'm angry, like in Inside Out. Nah, it's a feeling in your body. And when, again, the mind touches it, you get angry thoughts. You start personalizing it and you start reacting to it.
Yes.
And what you think you're reacting to is someone else when it's your body you're reacting to.
Well, when you're out of balance, everything's just kind of reacting to each other, and it's just like a five-alarm fire going off. It's just and your focus and your consciousness really has to try and when that's happening has to try and put these different fires out all at once. But it's just it becomes super overwhelming and it feels impossible. But we'll say again, in those moments, you will fall to your lowest level of healing.
Yeah.
And that's why practice is important. Another thing that we can do and that we should be practicing is that surrender needs a space to be heard. We need to give it time. We need to give it space. And it doesn't matter if it's meditation or prayer or just kind of sitting or even journaling. Create room in your day to listen without needing to fix, plan, push, control, whatever.
Well, it's like meditation, right? Another great example of these areas you hold space. Everyone thinks they're horrible at meditation. Not everyone, but a lot of people don't practice meditation because they're like, I don't know how to just sit there and shut my thoughts off. And it's like, that's not what meditation is.
No, you don't have
Meditation
to
is
do
where
that.
you sit there and let your body go through its things and you learn how to sit with it. Your
Yes.
mind will go crazy. If you're new to
Yeah.
it, your mind will not be quiet. I promise you.
Yeah.
But that's okay. That's the point. It's to learn to detach from those thoughts that are triggered by the reactions in your body as you're trying to sit there without moving. And that's why a lot of people don't understand why meditation, like they think they're horrible at it, and it's realistically they don't understand what the point of meditation is. And this is yeah. Yeah.
I love affirmations. Everybody knows this. You can use affirmations to start kind of programming yourself to work toward a space where you're surrendering more than trying to control everything that you can't control. Remember, and affirmations are not magic words. They're not magic pills. They aren't. I guess some people might say that they're spells because you're speaking something into yourself. They're really simple, powerful things. And I'll give you a couple off the top of my head. Let's see here. I release what I cannot control. I trust the unfolding of my path. I surrender to divine timing and wisdom. Those kinds of things. And affirmations are always better when you can create them for your specific need or in your
Yeah.
specific voice. You should always remember to use I statements. Those seem to work the best.
Yeah.
Here's another one. Surrender through service. This one helped me a lot. Surrendering through service. One of the most ignored or maybe underestimated forms of surrender is performing selfless action. When you help others without requiring any credit or payback or control, you really start to heal your ego and bring it more into balance with your soul. Because service roots you, right, in humility.
Go volunteer somewhere. You'd be amazed how good you'll feel at the end of it.
Yeah.
And the perspectives you're going to get to see there. Volunteering with the homeless, I've only done it a couple times, but every time you hear some interesting stories, you hear some valuable life lessons. And it's also a reminder of, like, you know what? I'm not that bad off right now.
Yeah. Perspective. It's really
Yeah.
powerful. Release the need to control the outcome and show up anyway. Just show up, right?
Yeah.
Take the step in faith, not because you know the result, but because it's right. Surrendering means letting go of how it will happen and showing up with presence and love anyway. Just show up. Just show up and don't concern yourself with how things are going to happen or how they're going to happen. Just show up, be present.
Yeah, and let it unfold the way it needs to. Again, it's that action aspect. You can contemplate the world of all the things you want to do. It doesn't matter if you're a novice or a master. Jump into the activities that you feel inspired to do and watch what unfolds before you.
Yeah. Yeah, so nature is a good teacher of surrender. Think about how the sun rises without your help or without your permission, right? Think
Yep.
about how the ocean tides move back and forth without your commands. How trees grow as they will in silence. This is one of those things where we can let creation teach us that surrender is already built into the literal fabric of the universe, right? And
Yeah.
remember that we are connected to that fabric and to those rhythms. And you have to learn to trust that you too are part of that rhythm, part of that flow.
And the more you do, the more you accept that, the more you surrender to it, the more you're going to stay above water, you know?
You'll be fine. And you're doing great. Let me remind you that this kind of practice, all of our practices, they aren't one-time things. It's a way of learning how to walk again. As you like to say,
Yep.
we crawl before we walk before we run before we sprint. This is a new way of learning how to walk. Walk softly, alertly, and trusting.
Beautifully said. Because it is. It's practice, practice, practice. All this work. No amount of mental thinking is going to fix this stuff in your life. But it's a matter of working with yourself and meeting yourself where you're at. I think one of the places I was stuck the most, and I know so many people that struggle with this, is surrendering to where you're at in life. Again, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I had a couple failed attempts, which is not a bad thing because at least I put myself out there.
Yeah.
But so often we're so attached to the top of the mountain that we don't surrender to the steps it's going to take to climb there, to focus on the steps and not the outcomes. Because the more we focus on just the steps we are taking, the more present we can be with those steps, the more energy we will have for those steps, and the more we will cultivate strength, abundance, and skills. Because when you look at the person you want to become, when you have a goal or a dream in life, one thing that most people overlook, and I was one of these people, is who do I need to become who do I need to become to obtain and hold that goal? Because often the goals and dreams we have require changing who we are as people. And I don't mean that as a bad thing, but the skills, the personal aptitudes, the hard things, whether it's sales or confronting other business owners because it's an aggressive market out there. You got to be able to understand that this is a journey and not a destination. You're just going to get there. The journey's the most important part. And through that journey, you might be sailing to Florida and wind up in Hawaii.
Yeah. It
So
happens
I just
literally every day, every single day to
yeah.
someone.
So do you have any exercises you would like to leave our listeners with?
Absolutely not, because I am quite smitten with the exercise that you are going to give them today. And I don't want to take away from that. It's a good one.
I appreciate it. So a good exercise to work on letting go is to take a minute and breathe and relax. Start to quiet the mind. Like we talked about, it's not something that happens, but start to let the mind quiet. As you do, look at the thoughts that begin to arise. And when they start to take you down a spiral, as you try to let them pass through, find the thoughts that take you down a spiral and look for the sensations in your body. Look for the resistance that is stopping you from letting them flow through you. As you focus on that feeling and remove the thoughts, sit with it. Watch it lighten. This takes time, but try to let that feeling in your body that those thoughts gave you exist in you without thought. Don't have judgment towards them. Don't try to intellectualize them. Just witness them. Then start asking yourself self questions like, what does this feel like? I know when I was starting to learn this practice, I was dealing with a lot of anxiety. It felt like rapid energy or bugs flying around. It could feel like snow. What's the color of it? Sometimes it can feel like tar inside of you. Just try to give it a physical representation in your mind. Now, sit with it and see if that feeling as you sit with it, as you look at it, watch it lighten and change. And if it doesn't, try to get in touch with it and ask, what does this feeling need from you? What is it trying to tell you? Give it all your love and attention. Build a relationship with this feeling inside of you. And the more you do, the more it's going to communicate with you. And the more you surrender to it, the more these emotions will be passing through you because you will start loosen your grip on the resistance you have of fighting it and you allow it to flow through you.
Yeah.
Now, this is something I really started incorporating in my meditation practice. The more I started to find a nurturing relationship with even those emotions I dreaded so much, like anxiety, like fear, the more I gave them space, the more they talked with me. And the more they talked with me, the less prevalent they were because they knew they were safe within me to let me know when things came up and I didn't fear them showing their heads. Because that's when the mind will take you down those spirals. So, for those journalers out there, write down something you are currently struggling with that you know you need to let go of. It could be a relationship, a job, it could be just a disposition you have to the world. And ask yourself, what need is holding on to this fulfilling? What am I getting out of this? Because I promise anything we are resistant to let go of is because that thing is fulfilling a need within us. Whether it's an excuse, whether it's how we're getting validation or it's security. Is it a belief that is telling you it's the right thing to do? Next, Write down what possibilities would open up if I release this from my life. What would I gain? And then ask yourself what would be more aligned with my authenticity? What would be more aligned with what I want in life and not necessarily what others want? If I could channel this energy into something else, what would that look like? Then lastly, ask yourself, who must I become to release this?
And I'll give you guys a bonus kind of journal centric thing. Each night, write down what you're trying to control. One thing. Do not overdo this. One thing. Each night, write down what you're trying to control and let it go on that page. Offer it up, whatever you do, to move on from it. This will also help you clear emotional clutter. Remember, we do things in steps, little by little by little by little. Slow and steady wins the race.
Yeah. It's so true, though. Well, we appreciate your time in listening to this episode of the new Ashla Podcast. We hope you gain some insight or wisdom out of this and have new skills to flow through life with. With love and gratitude. Ad Lucem.
Ad Lucium.